Welcome to another episode of Campfire Conversation. Today I have with me Cheri Wulff-Lucas out of Templeton, California, a friend of the show that I think it was Quarantine Cheri, right? That we did your episode.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I've also got Art Ortiz here from Dog Fit Dallas down in Dallas, Texas. And Art, it's been a while since you've been on the show.
Yes, this will be my third time though.
Oh, that's right, because we did the the sit down after the workshop.
Yep.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? God, the first one had to have been what, 3 years ago, I bet.
It was one of the first ones from what I remember.
Yeah. So first things first, obviously you guys know each other, but I haven't heard the story between the two of you as to how you guys met and how you guys crossed paths the first time. So I thought that'd be a good way to get us started.
Cheri,
Yeah.
go ahead. I know you know this, so.
Well, I started it because I saw him. I had no idea who Art was, but one day he came through. I guess it was probably Facebook. I was going through my feed and I saw this amazing guy standing downtown Dallas with these perfectly behaved, like a pack of maybe 12 dogs or something at least, and it was just a very powerful image to me. Nowadays you see dog walkers and trainers with packs of dogs all the time, but there was something about this photo. I just saw this calm, confident humility. I mean, don't ask me how I knew all that from looking at him, but I swear I did. And I never do things like this. But I reached out to Art and told him, I don't know exactly what I said to you, but I just said it was a great photo and that you looked really powerful or confident or something like that. And I had no idea who you were.
Yeah. And
yeah.
when you sent me that message, it caught me by surprise because obviously I knew who you were. And that was back in 2014. So I had only been working with dogs for 2 years at that point.
Wow.
And that was for a magazine cover there's a magazine here in Dallas called D Magazine, and it was for their 40th anniversary issue. And it was 40 stories over 40 years. And they used my story for the resurgence of downtown Dallas, because before downtown Dallas was kind of like run down. And so like they were having housing, people were starting to live in the city. And so I started my business while living in the city. And then they took this awesome picture with in the middle, it was on Main Street right in front of Neiman Marcus shopping center in this old apartment complex, which used to be like an old opera house. And it's right on Main Street. And then you can just see behind me is just Main Street. And there's just buildings on left and right of me.
Now, was that a setting that you would normally walk the dogs in, or is that brand new?
Nope. It was every day where I walked my dogs.
It's just a beautiful image. You don't usually see images like that downtown, and it's this beautiful downtown Dallas. It's not out in the country. It was just something really pretty about it.
Yeah, because normally these days I feel like you see, and I'm guilty of it, it's the outside pictures, it's in the woods pictures, it's in the country. You don't usually see too many images like that, at least in 2014, right? I mean, we're 6 years later here. It might be a little bit more commonplace than it was then. But so Cheri, you reached out and you thought that was a cool picture.
Yeah.
Art, I'm guessing you knew who Cheri was at this time, or you had no idea?
Of course, I used to watch Dog Whisperer.
Right, and that's what I figured, but I had to make sure.
Yeah. And then I don't know. We just sort of talked. We followed each other, and no big deal. And then all of a sudden he did. I don't know if you called me first or we talked first or not, but I don't think we did talk first. But then you registered for the workshop for my work, for the Lucas Agnew workshop, and came out with about 15 of your friends, which was amazing. You basically filled up the whole class practically. Art just was very kind and thought it would be a good learning experiences or whatever, but he invited all these other people, and we totally booked out. We probably had 30 some odd people, maybe 35 that workshop, which is a lot, but they all knew each other. So it was a pretty unique workshop because there was a lot of camaraderie that was already there between everybody. So it was amazing. I was deeply flattered and honored, and I loved getting to know Art, and it was amazing. And then we just went on to he hosted a workshop for us in Dallas, and bunch of stuff. We've done a few things together now. So
yeah, I think like the first workshop I went kind of by myself that first time, but after going, I said, hey, you guys, I started inviting people, and that's when my wife went too, and my wife went to the workshop, and she had a working spot, and so she went out there, you know, it was a bunch of people that knew each other. So it was really cool because like we all knew each other. And so, but it was also just a really good learning experience because, you know, with having you and Brian just kind of like coach us and guide us along with the dogs that we were working with was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Very practical.
Very cool. Yeah. And then I went out to Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was another time, but I went out to Dallas for a conference and played hooky, basically the equivalent of 2 days, so that I could hang out with Art and Annie and everyone. And we went out and had Mexican food and margaritas and sushi, and not on the same day.
I was going to say, that's a heck of a feast.
Not on the same day, but we ate a lot. Yeah, we had
some really good sushi.
It was amazing sushi at this place where, you know, they basically just brought everything out. We didn't even order anything. They just like, here's what you're going to like. It was amazing.
And I'm sure there was no talk about dogs during those meals either, right?
We don't really, I think we talk about other stuff.
Yeah, I think we do.
I
talk about life and future and like, you know, people.
Act like normal people. We act like normal people.
Yeah, I don't think we do talk about dogs in those situations.
No. I
never thought about that.
Because we have a genuine friendship. You know, it's not like we're just two trainers that happen to be in the same restaurant together.
Right.
We have an actual real friendship and relationship. So, and with Annie too. Yeah. So I think it makes all the difference. And you need a break from talking about dogs sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, gotta have a balanced life, and you're not gonna have a balanced life if that's all you talk about. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Art, what was it about the first workshop that you remember that you visited Cheri that said, hey, we need to pile onto this and I need to get more people out here to learn from her?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just the practicality of being hands-on and then seeing it. You know, I think like, you know, when you read books or, you know, you see things on social media, to see it in person was just, it was just amazing. And also to see how Cheri communicates to people. I think that's one of her greatest gifts, is how she's so clear and she's so confident, and she already knows what she's going to say. And so she just has this way of teaching that is really inspiring. And so like sometimes when I would watch her, I would just like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And I remember watching her, I said, I really want my wife to come and see this, because, you know, to have her, you know, just, you know, Cheri, you could share, you know, where you came from, your background and stuff like that. But, you know, you're very honest about where you came from and what you had to deal with in your life and whatnot. And then having to see who you are to this day is just, it's really awesome to watch. And so I remember just kind of, you know, seeing that, and I was like, I think this would be really good for my wife to go and you know, have check out. Because my wife, you know, we work together, you know, now that we have a son, she doesn't work with me as much. But you know, I just think that it's and I send a lot of people, and Cheri has a really good setup at her home where she works at, you know, and so people always ask me, oh, can you do a shadow? I'm like, no, I'm not really set up for something like that. Go see Cheri. Cheri has a really good setup for that, and you can learn a ton. So, but yeah, I think that's one of the main things that I really enjoyed, just how simple it was and fair it was to the dogs and things like that. So that's what I really liked about it.
Thank you. That's a pretty nice testimonial.
Should we just wrap it up right now?
Yeah, yeah. Before he says something that's, yeah. That's awesome. Thank you, Art. That's very sweet of you. I feel the same way about you. I really do.
So Cheri, I don't know if you know this. I have a little nickname for Art because I don't feel like he fits into the grand scheme of the dog training world sometimes. And he's an anomaly as far as his level of knowledge that goes along with the amount of years that he's had, because it's Art. You've been doing this for how long now?
What year is it? 2020? 8 years now.
8 years. I mean, I feel like he's packed a ton into 8 years, and it's more like 20 just because of what he's been able to experience, you know? And I think that also goes into the picture also that you saw of him too, because it's very powerful. There's composure there. It looks like there's experience within it as well. And so I've always said, you know, I think Art could have a perfect wrestler name, like Art the Anomaly Ortiz, you know, like an enigma kind of thing.
I can wear tights for you, Ian. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, just put on some tights and a singlet, Art. We'll do that for the next podcast.
I think you're so right on about that, because it is pretty amazing. And when I met Art, it was at least a couple of years ago, right, Art? So he'd only had 6 years experience then. And
Mhm.
I mean, he's, you know, this is a kind of work that it takes a long time. I mean, a lot of people ask me, students and clients, well, how are you able to do that? And it's like, well, because I just have done it for so long, you know. It's like experience and
Mhm.
wax on, wax off, as I always say in my workshops. It's just like getting a training principle or a training strategy down, even the most minute, nuanced strategy, and just working it until you're really good at it, and then moving on to something else, you know, and mixing it up. And that's years of experience. But Art, if he had told me he has been doing this for 20 years, I would have gone, oh yeah, look like about 20 years.
For sure.
That's how long I've been doing it. And Art is, you know, amazing. So yeah, I agree that he's very knowledgeable and very, very talented for 8 years of experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it, I
ahead.
think a lot of it is because, you know, I've always had an open mind with things, you know, and I kind of look at it from the outside perspective. You know, if I was a client, how would I want to be treated, you know? And so I've always been the person that kind of like, I'm always the quiet guy in the room. I'm not the loudest person in the room. And I actually saw a post today, I think it was from Tony Robbins' son. It said, insecurity is loud, confidence is silent, or something like that. And that really resonated with me because, you know, I'm always the one that gets overlooked because I'm the quiet one. It's usually the loudest people in the room that get the most attention, you know. And that's okay. I always feel that, you know, there's two people that can inspire people. There's people like Tony Robbins, who uses his size and his voice and his motivation, but there's also the Dalai Lama, who is very calm, you know, and doesn't need to do those things. And so I just want to, I've always talked about how I just want to be myself. I'm not trying to be anybody else. I just want to be myself, and whatever that is, you know, that's the best version of me is the best version for everyone else, you know.
You know, you can really put that into a pack of dogs too. You know, the one that's the loudest is going to probably get the most attention. The one that sits off to the side, that is the observer and that takes everything in, is just going to be the one that is just going to be hanging out on the outskirts and just be able to look at the group and take it all in and kind of measure things and be cool with it. You know, I think that's a cool way to look at it, as far as from the people version of, you know, the calmness, the confidence, and just being able to hang back and take it all in.
Right. And the calm ones in the pack are usually the ones that have the best good influence on the rest of the pack too. You know, like my Sondor, who's got very kind of neutral energy, and he's got a little bit of a sheriff in him, but he never takes it too far. When he does sheriff, he's helping me with my job anyway, so I'm fine with it. But, you know, he's not the boisterous one. The boisterous ones are the ones that are my unknown. They're the unknowns in the equation. Like, well, they're sort of kind of bomb proof, but if I bring this brand new dog in that's got some reactivity, might want to leave him out of the mix, you know. But Sondor's always the one that's chosen. He's like my most solid male. He's amazing. That's my Greyhound lab mix. Art knows him, that I brought back from Spain when I did a TV show there, and I brought him back with me. And he 17-hour flight, but it was worth it. It was better than him going back to the shelter after the show. So I'm glad. It was 8 years ago.
I have to touch on the whole balance of things too, because as we were just saying, you know, you guys don't tend to talk dogs, you know, because there has to be a balance. One thing I've always kind of wondered, and I want to get both your takes on this, is that having a balanced dog, and this whole term balance, because there are terms that are, I think, that are overused and also misunderstood. I even some days I look at balance and I'm like, I still don't have like a 100% perfect perception of it, because I hear some people talk that balance is not just 50-50, but 80-20 in how you train them, right? You could do 80%, you know, correction based and 20% positive reinforcement. Is that balance? Because it still equals 100. Is it 50-50? And what does the balanced dog look like? And so I feel like there is maybe confusion over it, or a misunderstanding of it. So Cheri, I'll hit you first with this here. What's your opinion on this balance term, and really where this falls into play, this 50-50, you know, is it even that?
So I'm going to have a little bit different spin on it. this is the way I look at training. Is I look at, let me give you an analogy. Art has a child. You have kids, don't you, Art? Ian, you have kids?
Yeah. Yep. Two kids.
So kids are, you're always raising your child. And so if theoretically, if it was possible to give your child 1000% direction on everything in life, it's not good to tell a lie, always be respectful, make sure you don't put things off to the last minute, never steal. If you just gave them this, litany of all these constant direction throughout their lives, they would never require a correction. Okay, so hang with me here. Okay. Then you look at a child that gets no direction. They come from a family that's fractured, or there's things that are going on in the family where the child doesn't get enough care or support. And so the child is just kind of idling out there. And those kids often get the ultimate correction. They wind up in the system. They wind up, I'm just talking, that's a very generalized statement, but
sure.
You know what I'm getting at here.
I get it. Yep.
If you look at it that way, and when you apply that same logic to dogs, if you're giving a dog enough direction, you're telling the dog exactly what it is that you want them to do. And you're setting them up to succeed and not fail. So you're not being unfair to them. You're saying, this is what I want you to do, but let me help you get there. Let me show you and guide you and tell you what it is that I want. And then if you don't get it, it's not because you're just trying to be a jerk. It's because obviously I haven't made it clear to you enough. I always take it on myself. What did I not teach this dog? Because I know dogs don't rationalize, moralize, intellectualize. They're just an instinct-driven animal, right? So that's how I look at it. What I try to do is give 95% of what I do is direction. At some point, a healthy correction, there are occasions where that's the only thing that will work. But that's 5% of the equation to me. Because if I direct the dog well enough, I don't need to do the correction, because I've already told them what it is I want, and I helped them get there. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit of a different take on it than, I don't look at it as a 50-50. I look at it as a 95-5. Direction, correction.
Yeah,
that makes total sense. Art, what do you have to piggyback off of that with?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I like how she started with, I have a different take. Me as being like a father, and like that makes total sense, because as also being a son, it also makes total sense, because growing up, my father and my mother was very like, these are the things that you need to do, and that was passed on from their parents. And I will say that, going back to the overused term, I hate using that word. I'm a balance trainer.
Yes.
Because it really kind of pigeonholes you in a way, and defines you. This is who you are. Because just like anything else, when you put a label on something, then it paints a different picture of who you are, right? So I'm of the belief that I have used that term. I don't feel, and not that I am against it, but I always define, what does that mean to you, And so for me, it's a balance. Like Cheri said, there's a guide, correcting and direction. I really like that, because that's a lot of what I look at the dog and I say, what do I need to do with this dog to help this dog succeed? What do I need to do to help this dog move forward? And whatever that is, whether it's a little bit of this or some, a little bit of that, whatever it takes. I mean, I don't want to, I think in life, and in my own personal life, I can speak from experience that, I can be as, let's say, mindset of being positive all the time, but there's going to be some times that no matter how positive you are, life's going to kick you in the ass, Yeah. And I'm not saying that for you to go into like the extreme, like let's say depression or whatever, and that is natural to do that, but how do you get out of that, And you have to get out of it through the guidance, knowing how to get out of it. So when I look at the dog, I have to be able to figure out, how can I help this dog succeed? And, whatever that takes for me to have a healthy relationship with this dog, how can I just guide and direct this dog? And so that's what I do. If we can put a label on that, well, so be it.
Right. And it's not cookie cutter. It's not a cookie cutter, which is what you're saying, Art. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Every dog is different.
The dog. Every dog and every child and every person. We're all different.
Yeah, I think, I probably used that word when I first started out, and you just assume balanced is like the dog in the beginning. For me, balanced was the dog just doesn't make any mistakes, bulletproof, it's fine, there's balance. You know, running a daycare on a daily basis and boarding dogs and board and train dogs, you see varying levels of that too, with varying intensities and what kind of reactions they have and stuff. So I think, I don't know, there's many words that are, I think, overused. And, you know, between the two of you, you know, here's the term balance that still, you know, it's like the triangle. You both are at the bottom. You're both getting to there. It might be just a little bit different. But again, it also goes back to the dogs that we're working with and how we get them there too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
Cheri, you had mentioned in the podcast that we did, I'm going to throw another word that I think you said you didn't care for too much, which was fulfillment. Because I think this is another term that's, you know, thrown around a lot. And I'm not trying to be like these are terrible words in the dog training world, but I feel like it's up to us to kind of explain this to dog owners as to what we think balance is within a dog and what we think fulfillment is within a dog. So, you know, looking at your own dogs, let's say, for example, what do you feel like you have to do on a regular basis to go to bed at night, put your head on the pillow and feel like, okay, my dogs are fulfilled?
Well, I'm not sure how I meant that, what context I meant that in, but I don't, yeah, I'm not sure, but I think the way I look at it is that what seems to be lacking for the most part for a lot of clients that are having a lot of trouble grasping the concepts that I'm teaching them, or that any of us are teaching our clients, because we all seem to have pretty much the same experiences. But so often is that the human has this idea of what it should be, how it looks to be a dog owner, or, you know, and how the dog has to fulfill them. They're looking at it that way. Well, when I was growing up, well, the last dog I had, and they give you all of these stories, and it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, should I even have a dog if I can't pet him and love on him all day? And that's when that shift comes in, where the human is only looking at what feels good to them and why they got a dog, without ever stopping to think, but this is a creature, this is a living being that also has fulfillment needs. It's almost like a relationship between two people. You can't just focus on what I need. At some point, you have to find out what your partner needs, or your friend needs, or your kids need, or whatever. And so I'm not sure exactly how I used that in the last podcast, but that's what I want to see, is when somebody finally realizes, you know, I wouldn't have come here to pay money to spend time with a trainer if I already knew the answer to this situation. So maybe we should look at it another way and think, I'm not fulfilling my dog, because if my dog was fulfilled, they probably wouldn't be behaving in this way. That's like totally simplifying it, but I think you get my drift.
Yeah.
It's not just about us. And at some point we have to decide, well, so what? We can't pet on, love on them all day long. I mean, we don't want to even have a human in our life that does that to us all the time, frankly. I mean, even the best of relationships, you don't want somebody just clinging to you all day long. And that's how a lot of dogs live. And they have to live with this kind of neurotic stuff going on all day long. And it's not healthy for them. So I hope I addressed that question the way you wanted, but I wasn't sure the context that I used it last time.
Yeah, absolutely. Art, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we talk about that, like, are we fulfilling ourselves? We have to ask ourselves that question. Are we doing things because it's fulfilling us? And that's okay. But also, when we use that term fulfillment, what does that mean for the dog, you know, from their perspective? And I think that people, and I hear that term a lot, but they use that term and say, these dogs are fulfilled, and they see dogs all on place and things like that. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but like, how do we get there? What is the strategy and the plan to get that? Because, you know, when my own personal dogs, like, I know for a fact that they enjoy going on a walk, right? And I love going with them. And that's just one of those things that I do as an exercise with them, to go on a walk, because if not, then we start to notice how they start to be a little frustrated. And so when frustration, in the human way, you know, humans that are frustrated, frustration leads to anger, anger leads to sometimes violence, you know? And so when I look at it like that, in the dog's perspective, they start becoming frustrated, that frustration starts to build. And not that I'm saying that they get angry, but they start to act out in ways that can be very wouldn't say unnatural, but it's the byproduct of not giving them what they need, because, you know, like Cheri said, you know, we get a dog and all we want to do is pet it. You know what? And there are times to do that. You can do that. I mean, if that's why we get dogs, you know.
Yeah.
But when we do it is important, you know. There's a time and place for those things. So it's important that we can look at the dog and say, you know, hey, right now is not a good time because XYZ, or right now is a good time to do it because, you know, I'm going to reinforce of how your mindset is at that point, you know? So there's, you know, when we look at fulfillment, we have to look at ourselves, how it fulfills us, but also how it fulfills the dog and how it makes them happy. And what does that mean? What does fulfillment mean? Words have meaning. So let's define it. Let's figure out what we can do to help those dogs to get to that point.
Especially too, when it comes down to a breed thing too, because you can have 3 different breeds at your home. You could have a Basset Hound and a Doberman and a Malinois or something. Like, you're looking at different ways to, quote, fulfill these dogs, and it's going to be in different ways too. And I think that's, for me personally, that's what I find a little frustrating sometimes with purebreds, is that you can take a herding type dog, like a border collie or a cattle dog or something, and in northern Vermont, there is no outlet for that dog to be able to practice what its DNA wants it to do. And I sometimes feel like we can only redirect so much. You know, a guy that studies quantum physics can only work at McDonald's for so long flipping burgers before he's going to have a need and a desire to want to do something else. So, you know, when I think of fulfillment, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what's the DNA of that dog? What's in that dog that's going to be, what's the ultimate thing I can do for that dog? If there's something I can provide that's there, okay, then great. If not, I've got to start like going down the steps and figuring out, what can I provide? You know, obviously the walk and mental activity. I just wish personally there was more out there for the dogs with the DNA that matches what they desire, you know?
Or if they were matched up to begin with, because
Yes.
I've got a border collie here right now that belongs to a really wonderful family that live in Beverly Hills, but they're right in the middle of a suburban area, you know, an urban environment. They have 3 young kids. They got a border collie that comes from a champion father that was from Wales, that, you know, won all of these awards herding sheep and doing all of these things. And he's just Mr. Busy Brain. He's just go, 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 go. And he's not a good fit for them. And they're so committed to them, and to their credit, they had me train him. And then now I'm just pretty much boarding him here, looking for a home for him. But this dog is a machine. He needs a job. He's not going to be a couch potato for anybody. And I've been putting him on my treadmill at night that I keep in kind of in my outside of my kitchen. Well, right there where my dogs are. And when I'm fixing dinner, and he'll stand on that thing and work on it for 46, 47 minutes. And then when I turn it off, he just stands there like, please don't make me get off. You know, he just wants a job. And so that was a bad match. And it's nobody's fault except, no, I won't say that. Somebody should have talked them out of, somebody should have told them that this is not the dog for you. That's all I'll say about that, because that is exactly what I was talking about in the beginning of your show. That's a setup for failure. And it shouldn't have happened, because that dog will never be fulfilled. I can't fulfill that dog. I don't have enough going on here. But I took him to sheep herding a couple of weeks ago, and it was the most amazing thing to watch I've ever seen. The dog, I've never seen that dog so happy. And within seconds, he'd never seen a sheep in his entire life. And he was perfect. He never went after them. He stopped when we told him to. It was incredible. So it was a beautiful thing to see. But, you know, that's when, you know, I run a humane society also. So that's another thing that I'm really careful about, and my organization is careful about, are good matches. You know, it's you can have a dog that's got all these issues, but if you put him with the right family, somebody that's one of these people that just, they want a project dog, or they want a dog that nobody else wants, or they, you know, there's that kind. And then there's so many different kinds of good matches. Again, I'm always going back to analogies with people, but you know, you just have to have that chemistry there. You have to have the right job for the dog if they're that wired to work.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I totally agree. And I will say that that's probably what I find one of the most difficult parts of our job sometimes is telling the people that they're not a good fit, because
Yeah.
you know, if they they're committed to this dog, but physically sometimes they're just not able to give what this dog truly needs.
Right.
And I've run into that too, and I've gotten a lot better at recognizing it from the very beginning. I used to be like, yeah, I can work with it, but then, you know, then the owners start having some trouble with the dog. It's because they're not, I don't say they're not equipped, but the dog is sometimes too much dog for them.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, we have to sometimes take a step back and say, you know, let's ask ourselves, is this a good fit? I've been in some bad relationships myself. I'm in a great one now, but I went through a lot of bad relationships in order to find a really amazing one. And that doesn't make me a bad person, because I, you know, I had some bad relationships.
That's a good way to put it, though.
It just wasn't a good fit. You know,
Yeah.
I think I can look back on my relationships, but man, they were not a good fit. I've been married before. I've been divorced, you know, we just weren't a good fit, you know? So
Yeah.
that can happen with dogs and people.
Mm-hmm.
That's I have to say, I don't know if I've ever actually had to have that conversation with somebody. Unfortunately, it's come to the end of like, okay, it's either manage the dog, try to find it the $1 million or the 1 in a million home, you know, on a 40-acre farm out in northern Vermont where there's nobody around, or there's the euthanizing part, because somebody somewhere told this 80-year-old couple that them getting a pit bull puppy was a good idea. And that match just, it didn't work. They just can't provide the outlet that dog needs. And it's unfortunate, but that's, you know, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for, you know, the matching part of it, but those conversations aren't easy.
No, they're not.
But they do have to happen sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Or the other thing, for me, like if I feel like if the dog is too much for them, I help them. I had a client recently that, I mean, this is a kind of a different situation, but I had a client that had a border collie, and already going into it, I'm already thinking, man, this is like, the dog's going to be wired, but actually the dog was pretty chill. Now, what happened in this situation is that the dog had bitten a child. Not their child, it was their nephew's, bit the kid in the face. And already I'm thinking, okay, like, well, what happened? Like, at the end of the day, I also have to look out not only for dogs' lives, but human lives as well. So when anything involves kids, I'm very careful of what I say, how I do it, and what I take on. And I have to look at the situation. And in this case, this kid was all over the dog, pulling the dog's ears, and the dog bit the child. And so the husband was very angry with the dog, said, I don't want the dog, but he was willing to at least talk to me, which that in itself was huge.
Wow.
He was at least willing to talk to me, but just talking to him and the wife, I just got this sense that he did not want the dog in the house. And I asked him, because she goes, what about training? I said, training is only going to work if both you guys are on board, because if he's not on board, it's not going to work. So you're just going to waste your money. And I just asked him, I said, do you want this dog? And he says, no, I don't. I said, well, then we're kind of wasting our, I mean, I said it a little more nice.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you know, training's not going to work. I mean, if you guys aren't willing to put in, you know, what's going to take, plus you guys don't even have the kids. So, I mean, I said, look, this is what I'm willing to do. I have an employee who wants a border collie, and I think this dog would be a great fit for him. And so they rehomed this dog with one of my employees. It was just this serendipitous situation that happened, because this dog is freaking amazing. Good with his cats, good in every situation, good with people. He was a dream dog, like a once in a lifetime dog. He just happened to have this incident.
Yep.
And so I was like, hey, this is going to be a perfect dog for my employee. I had the employee come over, meet him, and it's been like almost a month now, and it's been perfect situation, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are serendipitous events, but they do happen.
Yeah.
And it all comes together like pieces of a puzzle, right? Like it's easy.
Yeah. No, when it's a fit, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's always management involved, and no matter what. And here's another human analogy for you, because that's kind of the way I teach. But if you we're talking about setups for failure, how people inadvertently set up a dog for failure. In this case, it was a child climbing all over the dog, right? That dog finally just lost its tolerance. But, it's so easy to do. And people will bring us dogs. I'm sure all of us have experienced the same thing. And we'll work with them and we'll get them all honed in and really, let's say it's a dog that's got aggression issues with other dogs or reactivity or whatever. We get them all honed in and then we send him back and then there's an incident and it's like, well, what did you do? Well, we thought he was fixed. Well, yeah, maybe, but then there's also the management aspect to everything in life. So if you've got somebody that went to a human that has to go to a rehab situation for whatever situation, for some kind of addiction, when they come out, they're better. They've hopefully resolved their issues and they've learned some different strategies and ways on how to deal with that issue. But they don't come out and decide to just take up with their old friends and go to a bar the first night. So that's management. That's something that you can just tell yourself, I'm not going to do. I have to let go of some old ways. And so in the case of dogs, sometimes it's something that the dog is going to do fine, but you also don't take the same dog that's got a history of issues with other dogs and throw them in the dog park, because what you don't know is who else is out there. You have 99% of every dog that's in a dog park is a lot of times they're not even under the control of their owner. They're practicing excited behavior, dominant behavior. There's, people are sitting there on their cell phones and not even paying attention. So that's a setup for failure. Then the dog gets a bite on his record and it's like, oops, the dog was bad. Well, yeah, now because the human made the wrong decision about the dog, of what the dog could tolerate. Just like a human, coming out of a situation like that, an addiction situation, and then inadvertently setting themselves up for failure because they didn't break that pattern in their personal life. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of.
I sometimes feel like the whole dog park thing too is a little backwards. You talk about kids in school and stuff like that, Cheri, or structure. It's like oftentimes we see dogs that go to the dog park first, which is like what humans do after college, right? That's the real world. That's when you're going to run into anybody and everybody, and you don't know different personalities. But when things go wrong, then they go back to daycare, where they actually should have started to learn all those skills, how to get along with all those different personalities, work their way up, and then get into a dog park because all those skills are in place, but sometimes that dog park turns out to be the real world scenario. The dog doesn't even know how to get along with people or other dogs. And, things go sideways, and then it's back to the drawing board of either training or, daycare, whatever the case may be. But I feel like that's broken in a way, because it's just, that's what makes our dog happy, is taking him to the dog park.
Right.
I think people have good intentions, most people, but I think good intentions are not always the best idea. And I get that all the time. Like, oh, well, I took my dog to the dog. It happens all the time. I took my dog to the dog park, got attacked, and now I was afraid of dogs.
Right.
Good intentions, bad outcome. A lot of times people just don't know. I didn't know at one point. I know when I got my dog years ago, I was like, oh, let's go to the dog park. And looking back, I tell this to my wife all the time. One of my dogs, Hero, he's a little rat terrier. He's very sensitive. He doesn't he's right here hanging out next to me. He doesn't really he's not the playful type. He just wants to hang. Yeah. And so when I would take him to the dog parks, he just wanted to be, and not like in a guarding way. He would just trying to make them go away. He'd be like, rah, 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 like trying to make the dogs go away. And I would get in his face. And I used to get mad at him way back when. And looking back, I'm like, I was doing the wrong thing, because he was just uncomfortable in the situation, doing what he knew. I wasn't telling the dog to go away. So he's like, dude, if you're not going to tell him, then I'm going to tell him to go away. And this dog is I call him, he's my heart, because he's the sweetest, most genuine, gentle dog there is. And looking back, I felt bad that I would do that. I used to get mad at him because he would do those things.
I did the same thing. If the dog, because basically if you're not stepping up for the dog, if you're not advocating for your dog, then you leave it up to them. And a lot of times, if they correct another dog and the other dog isn't balanced, then there's going to be an issue that you inadvertently created. I used to do the same thing. I would always get mad at the dog that growled. But the other dog's coming into his face, with this ridiculous poor meeting style. Yeah. And then, your dog is sitting there. Sometimes I've even seen my dogs look up at me like, you going to do something about this? And if I don't, then I'm inadvertently putting my dog in a position where he has to defend himself, and that's never good. So yeah, I think that's really important, Art, definitely.
Art, you and I, talked quite a bit over quarantine about daycare and whatnot and everything, and now I actually get to talk to you face to face about it. We're now just 3 months into this, new daycare program that we have going on here, which I can't thank you enough for, because we kind of, and it's still tweaking. We're still tweaking it a little bit to this day as far as what our schedule does throughout the day. But what first came to your mind when you saw daycare change, or when was it? Who was it? Because I want to give credit where credit's due here.
Like, what do you mean? Like in the sense of what we talked about?
Yeah, like because it's different. It's not dogs just romping around all day playing and
Well,
open
I
yard,
think we
open
should
area.
give credit to this person. Liz Foley is the person that probably I give most credit to, from the Doghouse Waterloo up in Canada, because she runs a really tight ship when it comes to her daycare. She does very things like, you guys don't follow her on Instagram. Her stuff is amazing, and so she just has this like awesome little daycare where like the more energetic dogs, she puts them in treadmills, and then she puts them. They go and they play, so they she allows them to go play and have fun. But everything, whether it's through thresholds, she slows the dog down coming into the door one at a time. And then she does this thing called nap chat, where they all just kind of like
Yep.
sleep and hang out and things like that. And those are the same things that you and I had talked about, because also, Cheri, from Renee from Dingo Dogs, or Dingo
Yeah,
Doggies out there in
that's
Santa
who I was
Monica.
going to bring up, Art, as soon as you brought up Liz. Yeah, I love Liz too.
When you told me about her, Cheri, I remember I saw that. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. And I thought to myself, and I had some conversations with people that have always wanted to do like a place that had like stations, like some dogs on treadmills, some dogs on plates, some dogs learning to work on a crate, some dogs going to work, walking through thresholds. So there's all like these stations, almost like a gym in a way, but
Right.
every dog is getting work to learn something
Right.
that's practical. It's not just like, oh, my dog can sit, but it wants to bite
Right.
wants to bite me,
Yeah.
But these are things that are tangible that the owners can take home, and really changes how the dog sees this world, how it sees a doorway, how it sees, going on a walk, how it sees being around its own kind. And I
Right.
think that's really, really important. And so, Liz Foley is one person that I've talked to a lot. I haven't talked to Renee, but I know you know her, Cheri.
I love her. She's a close friend. And, I think too, Art, like what we were talking about dog parks earlier, but when you look at the way certain people run daycares, like your daycare, and Renee with Dingo Doggies, and Liz, it's all like the antithesis of a dog park scenario. So, you see there are daycares out there that is just a free for all. And then the dogs, so often I'll get calls from my clients where the dog was doing great in this free for all kind of a situation every day, but then they couldn't calm down when they got home, or things started to fall apart, and then they get in a fight with another dog, whatever. The beauty of a well-run daycare is that you are basically, instilling in them the ability to calm down. And it always feels better to be calm than to be overly excited. And so often, from a human perspective, we look at a dog that's really excited and we think, oh, the dog's so happy. Not really, because in their natural world, they don't ever act like this, or they wouldn't be able to, avoid chaos within the pack. They wouldn't be able to survive. So when you do these things that require that mental challenge as well, like going on a play sport and then being invited off one at a time, going through a tunnel, going over a teeter-totter, all that stuff is like so draining, but in a much more positive way, where the dog is de-escalating, and that adrenaline isn't getting jacked up all the time. That's the opposite of what a dog park does, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so effective. I've been to your place, Art. It's amazing. I haven't been to your place yet, Ian, but I see your Instagram posts with all of your little letters that you do every day, which is amazing. So I'm assuming you work the same way. But I know Art's place, God knows how many dogs I've seen at his place at one time, and you don't even hear them bark. It's just like mellow the whole time. And I don't know, there's a serenity about your dogs, Art, that's pretty amazing. And, they're all individually owned by other people. So somehow you've been able to manage to keep that thread of calm running all the way through your clients' dogs. It's pretty amazing. So
I will say that also, I think people send their dogs to daycare, and when they get the dog back, the dogs are exhausted. So they're like, oh, I got a calm dog at the end of the day, but it's how we got there.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
how that dog has built that association being around the dog. So now we've created, yeah, your dog is calm, it's resting, and it's not bothering you. But now let's take it for a walk. Now he sees another dog. And when I'm around other dogs, I'm always adrenalized. So when I see another dog, I'm going to get adrenalized on the leash. So now I'm on the leash and I'm going to get frustrated. Now I'm frustrated. So now I'm going to redirect to my owner.
Right.
You know, and so
that's what you've taught them. You know, that's what they've been taught. Yeah.
We've seen two huge things. Is, you know, we've started with a pack walk every morning now. So, I mean, we're anywhere from 15 to 25 dogs on an hour, you know, leashed walk in the morning. And so obviously that sets the tone for the day. And the downtime with the dogs, I mean, there's some days you could hear a pin drop in the place because they are just laid out flat in their kennels. They've, you know, and it's been great. The other part of it too that we didn't see coming is that obviously because of COVID, our office area here is quite small. So we've just told all of our clients, just hang out at your cars. We'll come get your dogs. We'll bring them out to you. It's given us more time to work with the dog, leading them out to the owner, than all of a sudden coming through a door and their owner is standing there in the middle of the office. So the pickup and drop off, I mean, I don't know. I may just end up keeping it this way. Not that I don't want people in the building by any means, but this is something that we didn't see coming, you know, with the change. But we, you know, for some dogs, they've got to come through the kennel door from like our training room, and then through another door into the daycare room, through a gate, through another door into the office, and then another door from the office outside. So those are 5 thresholds that the dogs have to go through with us, you know, on the way out at the end of the day. And, you know, my guys they're stopping at every one of them and getting eye contact and getting them to be chilled out. And so
That's
dogs
awesome.
being returned at the end of the day are not, you know, there's not the huge overwhelming greeting. There's not the jumping up on the owners. It's been cool to see, you know, those changes, the ones that you can see compared to, you know, where we were at before. And I don't think we were doing things badly before. There's just a lot more structure, and we're giving them something to do now than what we did.
Well, plus you don't have to, I'm assuming you don't have to deal with the owner coming in just, oh my God.
Right.
Hi,
Right.
baby. And starting right off the bat of escalating the dog, you know, who has been calm all day. So that's kind of your silver lining to this whole quarantine thing, is being able to structure things a little bit differently. I think it's great.
You know, that's what's interesting about Liz Foley's place, because I've been to her place up in Waterloo. She has rules on how people are supposed to enter with their dog.
I saw that on Instagram.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
But go ahead.
So she makes people like, your dog is not allowed to come in pulling you, is not allowed to come in overexcited.
That's
And
awesome.
she makes the owners, because at the end of the day, they have to go back to the owners, right?
Yeah.
So she has these rules. In order for your dog to come to daycare, your dog has to do these things before it even walks in the door. Now, things have changed with COVID, and now they have a whole procedure on like how they get dropped off and picked up and whatnot. But yeah, I found that very interesting that she made these rules that before you get your dog dropped off, you can't pull it in. You have to be on board with what we do here, which I think is awesome.
What's her Instagram name, Art? Because I don't know why I'm not following her. I know her.
Doghouse Waterloo.
Oh, okay.
House like German.
Well, of
H-A-U-S.
course.
Well, of course. I just think this has been pretty cool. I mean, between, you know, so for my take off of this are, you know, we're doing this pack walk, and then they do downtime, then they do a little social, and then downtime, we do a little bit more social, and then it gets into the, you know, the group place work, you know, with the beds and all the different designs and stuff that we do. But then from there, because as much as I kind of wanted to ramp it up, so it was like a walk, we kind of get the day started, we do, you know, social, and then downtime social again. But then that second social is like, that's the peak of the day. And then we're coming back down. So it's like the group place time. And then we go from there into like the smaller room with all the dogs for like a group downtime. So that was kind of, you know, my thought, so to speak, as far as them being able to have social in the middle of the day. But then the rest of the day we're working on, you know, slowing things down. So it's funny. I look at the first the first like schedule I made out and like, this is what we're going to do. And then I look at where we are now 3 months into it. But I have to say that one of the coolest things is that when we get back from a walk and you start unleashing everybody inside, and a lot of these dogs, our regulars, have like their certain kennels that we, assign to it at the beginning of every day. They start going over to the kennel already because they know it's downtime, and they know this is where I go afterwards, or this is after this is, downtime, or we come in from social. And so it's been kind of cool to see them process that and kind of know what's coming.
Well, it feels good too, so they've been taught, they've been given a way to resolve conflict and to say, okay, this is what I would like to do because this is what makes me feel good. And so that's cool to watch, as opposed to, let's go play ball again. It's really what everybody's seeking is balance, from the perspective of just getting your head balanced, just like people want to be balanced.
And Ian, you and I had this conversation many times on the phone where we always talked about perception of what people think their dogs need. And we talked about, we have to, like, people look at what I do in our business as a pack walks. They don't see the value in what the pack walks bring as opposed to what daycare brings. Okay.
Yes.
So we're always trying to change that perception of pack walks are more valuable, even though they're more expensive than you sending your dog to daycare. It's what is the final outcome that your dog gets. Okay. And even with what you do, and that's a conversation we had, how do we change the perception of the way we do daycare is better than what most people offer? And, that takes time, and that takes, people just don't see that. So and we had this conversation, well, how can we educate people to say, this is better for your dog doing these things, and that's why, like, I have respect for people like Renee and Liz, and then now you're doing it. We don't do it anymore. I mean, sure, you probably didn't know this, but I'm not offering boarding or daycare anymore either. Because I had to look back and see what brought me joy, what was not bringing me joy, and keeping a lot of dogs here at my house. Me working 24/7 was something that was just, I love doing it, but I'm just like, I was to the point now where I'm not doing that. So we're doing things differently now, and we'll see. I'll share with you guys once I have a clear picture what that is. But I mean, we're also planning for other things down in the future. I used that time during COVID because we had to shut down. So
yeah,
I and Ian, I work out of my home. We've had this conversation before where, and Cheri, so do you. And there is the way my home is set up, there is some separation, but I really enjoyed when we had the shutdown of how I got to spend time with my own dogs. I got to spend time with my family. Those was like something that can never be taken away from me. It was this moment in time that I was like, wow, I want to do more of this somehow,
It is amazing when a dog, sometimes just one dog, one particular dog, when they go home, it's like, oh, it feels like 10 dogs just left, and I love dogs. But sometimes it's just the turning them out, bringing them in, turning them out, bringing them in. I don't do daycare because I don't have staff, for one thing. I could, but I for the same reason that you don't do it anymore, Art, it's just not, I don't have a separate facility. You have a separate facility, and right. So you've got that. I mean, that's the coolest part about doing it, would be to have a facility. Then I might change my mind, but and also I'm in a remote area, so it's kind of hard for people. I would have to go pick them up and drop them off, and I don't have that either. But yeah. I like the way things are set up. I'm doing the things that give me joy.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And I will say that, for me, I thought about, maybe I will open up have a brick and mortar and have a building. But for me, I love being outdoors. As you guys, I don't know if you guys seen some of my videos. I know, Cheri, you've seen them where I have the dogs off. Well, they're on your long lines, Cheri, on the dynamic long lines, because we do have leash laws, and I am using public land. I have acres and acres of public land that I can use. And I just have these dogs on the long lines, and I just have them go out there, and they kind of just follow. And that is one of those things that brings me the most joy, is doing those things. Of course, it's super hot right now, so I can't do that,
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the struggle that we're doing now. And I thought, should I get a brick and mortar? But then I was like, I can't, it's still going to take me away from the things that I truly, really want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I know during quarantine, it gave me a chance to kind of reconnect with my two dogs, and it was just cool to me that I walking them on leash, near my house, I could get to a certain spot where there's just, I got river on one side and a road way up a hill on another. It's an old railroad track, and there's just nothing around. And I just put, some different, I had like leash on, a backpack, first aid kit just in case. I had everything I needed. Food, but there was something cool about getting ready to go for that hike and knowing I can just clip on these leashes when it's time. They can follow me. We can go have our fun. We made it to a river where they kind of romped around in and still worked on some recall in a new environment. And that was super cool to me to like reconnect in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what you mean, Art, with like just being able to get out there with your dogs and kind of do your own thing again. It kind of, it brought me back to what I used to do out of my house. And I don't miss having dogs in my house. And I remember having that conversation with Colleen too on the podcast, because she was getting ready to open or something like that. And I'm like, wait until you feel what it's like to like, lock the doors at the end of the day at a facility and go home and have a home back. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
So
No.
I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, and my numbers went all the way down as well when quarantine hit, because everybody was, so afraid, especially in March and April. And it was just an amazing, like I said, this is definitely a silver lining. Like, not have a lot of income right now, but it's really kind of cool to just have your own dogs around. And so, in the beginning, I remember feeling like I was just kind of spinning, like I don't know what to do. I don't have enough to do. And then in short order, it didn't take me long to figure it out. So it was pretty cool.
Cheri, have you gone through, you obviously have a lot more experience than Art and I do. Have you found yourself going through different phases within your 20 plus years where you're like, this is what I want to do, and then that runs its course, and then you find something else, and then that runs its course? Or is this kind of like been who you are, what you wanted to do for a very long time?
Oh, geez, you wouldn't have even recognized me. I was so different in the beginning. Yeah. And from, just in a brief synopsis. So I guess in my early days of training, I focused way more on correction. It's bad dog, corrected. Not in a harsh way, but that's how I basically, if I saw a misbehavior, my mind immediately went to, got to correct that. Got to tell that dog that's not the way to be. Yeah. Rather than stopping and thinking now, after all these years, there's so much goes into the way I look at a dog, and I don't look at it as the dog misbehaving, because I know the dog isn't capable of making a decision to be bad. They're not capable of that. They're not as evolved as that, like we are. We make decisions to be bad sometimes, but so that's been a huge evolution for me. And then you guys will crack up when I tell you this. Probably maybe 10 years ago, I started getting people contacting me and saying, "Oh, I'd love to learn how to train the way you do. Could I come and, shadow with you or volunteer for you, and in return, you could teach me some things." And I was like, I don't do that. I don't mentor people. It never even crossed my mind that I might have something of value to give to somebody else, or that I was a teacher. And then when it dawned on me one day, I'm a teacher. That's what I do, and it was just such a funny evolution to it. It's like, now that's the bulk of what I do. As I train in workshops, I train privately. And now I love it, because this feels like that's my whole life. And it's not just about dog training, but I love to work with people. And if you don't have good people skills, which you guys both have amazing people skills, but if you don't, you're only going to get so far as a trainer. Because if you don't understand the human and understand how to relate to the human in such a way that they can take what you're telling them and apply it to their dog. And it's not a set of bullet points. Do this, do this, do this with your dog. It's also about, how do you feel about your dog? Are you looking at things from your dog's perspective? Are you asking your dog to fulfill a need within you that they can't fulfill? This relationship is like codependent. I mean, you have to look at all the different things that go into a dog's behavior. So that's the biggest evolution, is I don't look at it as a black and white. These are the issues and this is how we fix it. I look at it as, well, let's look at a comprehensive overview of your relationship. It's flawed. It's dysfunctional. And it's a huge metamorphosis for me.
And to piggyback on that, Cheri, and I've told you this before, and when it comes to dog training, there's no absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because some people say you should never, whatever, you should always, but
Right.
you can't, this is not the dog that, you don't always do this with this dog.
Right.
You don't
Yeah.
always do that with that dog. And so, when you look at a dog, you have to make some adjustments to yourself and figure out, okay, again, how can I help this dog? And that's one of the things that it's stuck in my mind is there's no absolutes. There's always, I just said always, but there are no absolutes in dog training.
Right.
I caught myself,
Cheri, do you feel like what you're doing right now, just in the sense of, having the career that you have and doing what you're doing with dogs every day, is that something that you strive for 10 years ago? Is this something that just slowly turned into, this is what I want to do every day?
It was probably a process. It was the realization that you can't fix the dog if you can't help the human, I think, more than, and then I have this huge pull towards, I really love women. I really like helping women. I am a woman. That's probably part of it. But I just have, I also went through a lot of my own stuff for many, many years, starting from my teenage years until I was 40. I had really bad chronic depression. And so when you've been through that and you've learned how to crawl out of that, then you run into other women and you can see that this applies to men as well, but I guess it's easier for me to, I think you see it more in women than you do in men. Maybe men squelch it down a little bit more. Again, it's a big generalization, but I see so often where women have such a lack of confidence and their self-esteem is so bad that and I look at them and I'm thinking, you are amazing. How can you not feel good about yourself? But that when they're like that and they're with a dog, a lot of times they ask their dog for too much. They ask their dog to help them through that. I was always all over my dogs. And I remember now looking back on it, how one time I had kind of like a breakdown in my kitchen years ago, like over 20 years ago. And I just sat down on the kitchen floor and was crying. And I looked up and all my dogs had left the room. They were like, wow. She is not being very balanced right now, and that's before I was even a trainer. But that was my first clue that dogs are such sensitive creatures and that actually my behavior and the way I feel, even just in my head and my heart, is actually something that they pick up on. So how can you just, like Art was saying, there's no one way to do anything, but if you don't integrate that human part of the equation when you're trying to help a dog, you're only going to get so far. I'm not saying you can't do it, but in my opinion, you're only going to get so far until you understand how to work with that human and tell them things about themselves that maybe they didn't know, or maybe they did, but they didn't realize it had an impact on the dog. They just didn't know.
Yeah.
How many of us, how many times have you guys gotten dogs that come in and the owner says, oh, here I am with my dog. By the way, I know it's all my fault. Or I know this is all about me. They kind of know it at some level, but they don't, they need you to tell them for sure. Yeah, you're right.
But Cheri, sometimes I feel like people are saying that because they've heard it so much. Because I feel like that's, as much as we talked about balance and fulfillment earlier, I also feel that now that's more pop culture-ish to say, if there's something wrong with my dog, it all comes from me. So
that's a good,
I definitely agree with what you're saying, because there are some that come in and they're like, truly, I know it's me. You just need to just help me out. Just give me the key to the city so I can figure this out. But then I feel like there's others that will walk in and be like, yep, I do. It is me, because that's what I've been told, or my dog is dominant because I've been told that, or, so.
Which means that you're not their first trainer, which means they've had, this is another thing early on when I first would get a client that would say that, and they'd go, you're the fifth person I brought the dog to. And, when I was younger, my first thought was, in my little stupid judgmental way, oh, well, the other trainers didn't know what they were doing, but now they're with me. And it's like, oh no, that's not exactly right. It's possibly that the other trainer didn't know how to work with the dog properly, but it's more likely that actually the human just didn't apply what they'd been taught before, because I see it. And that now when somebody says that to me, I wonder if I'll be your last. Or
right.
I wonder if I'll be included in one of the last 6 trainers you had, because you know that it's, if, you know, basically if you just work your dog, just go out and try something. You may not have the exact formula, but geez, don't just bring a dog in and then just say, well, you're as good as my last dog. My last dog, I didn't have to do anything for. Well, you know, you guys have kids. Art, River's, you know, at the perfect stage right now, but you know, you have kids, and if you have more kids, and I'm sure Ian would agree, they're all different. You know, you learn new things from each kid. I don't have kids, so somehow I use kids in analogies all the time.
And that's okay.
Well, I used to be a kid, so there.
Right? Yeah.
That's how
Good point.
You've been there. I may not have kids, but I've been one, so I know.
By the way, I want to add something really quick. You know, Cheri talked about, you know, she loves working with women, and I think it's so important. It's so needed, because the amount of sexism that is that I've seen within this industry is really bad. And I say that because I've seen it. And when I spent time in the very beginning with Colleen Steckloff out in LA, Colleen Aguilera, I'm sorry, she got married, and I would go with her to appointments, and sometimes the husbands would be like, "You're gonna tell me this girl?" They wouldn't say that, but you could just see it on their face.
I bet.
Who's this little girl that's gonna come and help me with my aggressive dog? And then she would work with them, and then be like, "Whoa, okay." But you know, like I've seen it, and you know, firsthand, and it's not fair. And so I'm really glad that Cheri is doing these things, because you know, what better information, you know, to get information from a woman to a woman. You know, I actually worked with this dog about a year ago, and I said, you know what, I think you need to work with a woman. And I point her in directions, whether it's with my wife or one of my employees. And then she ended up moving to Arizona, and I put her in contact with a trainer out in Arizona. And I told her, I'm like, hey, I think you could be really good for this person, because it comes from a woman's perspective.
Mm-hmm. And
so,
sometimes the other way around. I've had that happen as well. But I find too, if the case is really severe, and if the owner is really like at their wit's end, and like this is the last time I'm going to do that, they're humbled. If there is a man out there, I haven't really, to be honest with you, really felt like I've, in all these years and 20 years, I can count on one hand the number of times I felt like a man wasn't paying attention to me or didn't value my opinion because I was a woman, that it actually clicked in my head. And that's 20 years is a long time to only have a handful of those. You know, maybe it's happened, but they hit it, or I didn't pick up on it or whatever. But I feel like if somebody brings a dog that's really bad, and they're going to either euthanize that dog, or they're going to rehome it or take it to the pound, and their family's going to be heartbroken, I think they're at the point where it's like, just tell me. You know, when they get to that point, it's different. And so maybe that's kind of the kind of trainer that I feel like I am. I sort of feel like I'm last stop sometimes for people. Because that's a little bit of the reputation that got started for me, was working with the really aggressive cases. Mark Goldberg, you guys both know, he's so funny. Mark's such a good friend of mine. I haven't seen him in so long, but he's so funny because Mark, you know, he's a great trainer, but he's also a very solid businessman. Like if I had his business sense, I would have a mansion up here, you know, for sure. But he's really funny, you know, the way he looks at things. He said, you know, Cheri, I look at you taking on these gigantic dogs that weigh more than you, and you get paid the same that you would get paid if you brought a golden retriever puppy in and taught it sit, stay, come. And I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't have any fun, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be there for that really bad dog. But he's right. I mean, he's right. It would be much more profitable to work with easy cases and make the same, because I don't charge more for an aggressive dog. I don't know why we don't do that in our industry. But anyway, Mark's so funny. I love Mark.
I think we're going to see an evolution too when it comes to dog trainers out there. I mean, you can see it in the workshops that there's, I mean, Art, you've attended obviously a ton of workshops, and I think it's safe to say it's always a majority female than it is male. And I think we're going to see an evolution in the next 10 years where it's going to be a lot more women trainers than it is going to be men. I mean, there's a reason, whatever it is, but there's a reason that there's a lot more women than men that are attending these workshops and that are educating themselves and teaching themselves and learning about themselves and empowering themselves to the point where they are going to turn into business people. They are going to be successful trainers. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of them here between Liz and the lady with the dingo doggies. I mean, it can't, I would be shocked if it didn't happen to where majority of the workshops will be taught by women.
Most of my shadow students are women too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just where the industry is headed. And I think it's headed in the right direction. Not saying you and I are take out the trash out back by any means.
Which I still do.
But I think that's where it's headed. And I think it'll be headed in the right direction too.
I agree.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this up. I mean, over an hour already, and it seems like it was a drop in the bucket. So for those of you that want to contact Art or look him up, it's Dogfit Dallas, Instagram, Facebook. I think that's your website too, right, Art? Dogfitdallas.com? Correct. And then Cheri stuff is just look up CheriWulff-Lucas.com. She's in Templeton doing her thing. Make sure you follow her on Instagram. She's got quite the thing going on with the Cane Corsos out there that she rescued. So it's been a pretty cool story to follow. Myself and a couple of my staff members have been following Cheri too. So it's been fun to watch the progression of how far you've taken them too.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, Ian and Art, Dodo did a story on us, and it's coming out on the 20th.
Oh, awesome.
Nice.
In 3 days. Yeah. So that's going to be pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, I have no idea what it looks like, or but it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
That is very cool. All right. So until maybe you guys will come back on again, we'll have to do it another time. But thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ian. And good to see both of you guys.
Good seeing you.
Bye.
There. So go ahead and stay on.
Okay.
So
That was
I'll
nice.
just stop
Thank
the
you,
recording
Ian.
here. You're welcome.